to provide a safe and caring climate and culture in which we engage, inspire, educate, prepare, and empower all learners in partnership with their surrounding community to be successful in today's and tomorrow's society. Scott, can you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Thank you. And then when you're ready, Scott, can you please call roll?
The following board members are present at the district office. Scott Andreasen here. Al Dahlgren.
Here.
Zach Dorholt. Here. Diane Fenton.
Here.
Shannon Hawes.
Here.
Following board members are not present. Natalie Copeland and Heather Weems. The following cabinet members and staff are present at the district office. Assistant Superintendent of Secondary Education, Dr. Jason Harris. Assistant Superintendent of Eve through 5 Learning, Nikki Hansen. Assistant Superintendent of E through 12 Educational Services, Shannon Evenson. Executive Director of Community Education, Adam Holm. Executive Director of Operations, Joel Heidkamp. Executive Director of Special Projects, Gary Ganji. Director of Community Engagement and Communications, Tammy Deland. Media Technician, Gordy Scott. Custodian on site, Austin Goodwater.
Thank you. And next, I need a motion to approve tonight's Board of Education meeting agenda. Can I get a motion and then a second, please? Okay, I have a motion by Diana, and can I get a second?
Second.
And a second by Zach. Scott, can you call vote?
Shannon Hawes.
Yes.
Diana Fenton.
Yes.
Zach Dorholt. Mr. Dorholt.
Yes.
Al Dahlgren.
Yes.
Scott Andreasen, yes.
Thank you. Then we have the consent agenda. The consent agenda consists of non-controversial items the board adopts routinely without debate. Any single member may remove an item from the consent agenda by requesting removal at the time the consent agenda is moved for adoption. On tonight's consent agenda, item A, approval of minutes from February 5th, 2025 and February 19th, 2025. Item B, approval of bills and other financial transactions in a grand total amount of $4,408,687.76. Item C, approval of personnel staff changes. Item D, acceptance of grant awards and donations. And item E, contract award audit services. At this time, does any board member wish to remove an item from the consent agenda? Okay, then I'm looking for a motion to approve the consent agenda as read. I have a motion by Al. Do I have a second? Second. And a second by Diana. Scott, can you call vote one more time?
Diana Fenton.
Yes.
Zach Dorholt. Yes. Al Dahlgren.
Yes.
Scott Andreasen's yes. Shannon Hawes.
Yes. All right. Thanks. Nice job. Appreciate you filling in. Okay, we're moving on to information items. We have 2 tonight. First up, we have the LEAF report, Local Education Activities Foundation, and we welcome Diane Moeller, the 2024 LEAF president. And then we have Tammy Deland, Director of Community Engagement and Communications. Thanks for joining us tonight. We're glad to have you here.
Is it on now? Okay. Thank you very much for the opportunity. We're very proud of the things that have gone on with LEAF this past year, and we're here to share a little bit of that success with you. Yeah, you can just keep rolling through the. The board of directors are listed in the first slide. As you can see, we have most of the activities directors from the district are serving on the board. as well as Justin as the principal rep, Justin Scalrud. If you go to the next slide, I am the past president because Charlie Eisenreich just took over as president. It was fun to pass the torch to him. And Beth Benstead, a teacher at Tech High School, just recently retired, has agreed to be vice president. So we're very excited about the leadership going on at Leaf. It was a hard transition, but Bruce Hench has had a few big shoes to fill with his retirement. Natalie's done an awesome job, and we're very happy with the direction we're going. So we have a video produced that we're pretty proud of. We showed it at our annual meeting back in February, but it's about a 3-minute video, I think. So if we could take a minute to view that, I think it'll give you some highlights.
30 years ago, middle school activities in St. Cloud were at risk of disappearing. In response, a group of teachers, parents, and community leaders created an education foundation to preserve and expand these opportunities for our students.
What began as a grassroots, community-driven initiative has evolved into a cornerstone of support for District 742 students and educators, uplifting generations of learners. For over 30 years, Leaf 742 has been dedicated to fulfilling our mission to raise funds through donations and grants to increase student access to vital opportunities in academics, activities, arts, and athletics.
LEAF programming is designed to inspire the community to support District 742 students. And we know that supporting students means supporting the devoted staff across our 14 schools. Since 2011, LEAF has offered something special, the Adopt a Classroom program, which allows families, community members, and local businesses to sponsor a classroom through high school by providing a grant for essential supplies.
We are so grateful for our classroom grants, which have allowed us to integrate innovative and new resources into our classrooms as we have transitioned to the new Minnesota State Science Standards.
Because of your support, we are able to provide relatable and engaging materials for all of our students. We've also set up and continues to manage 2 endowments, one for activities and the other for academics. These endowments, all funded by donations from our community, allow us to provide grants that bridge funding gaps to increase access and opportunity for students to have the resources they need to succeed. In 2024, we surpassed $3 million in total grants to District 742 programs.
South Junior High received a LEAF Activities grant this fall, and we were able to fund new equipment for our baseball and softball team. Because of the support, our athletes are able to compete with better gear and perform at their best. Thank you, LEAF 742.
I remember when our community 742 activities program. That was 30 years ago, and that support has continued without pause through LEAF programs dedicated to helping our most vulnerable students. From providing crisis shelter for a family with 3 young children during our frigid winters, to provide an athlete whose family couldn't barriers, and ensuring all students have the opportunity to succeed.
Our community is coming together once again to offer middle school activities free of charge to all students. Starting in the 2025-26 school year, LEAF will fund the elimination of 2 years' worth of middle school activity fees for all students. District 742 and LEAF are committed to ensuring every student has the chance to explore activities, from soccer to robotics, thanks to our generous donors. If you haven't yet, join us, won't you?
Thank you, Leaf!
Thank you, Leaf. Thank you, Leaf.
Thank you, Leaf!
Should I wait for the music to stop? We have an awesome communications committee that really worked hard to get that video created. So kudos to them. It really turned out well. I think our excitement over next year's or the following year's elimination of the activity fee at the middle level is pretty, when you think about the cycle, so LEAF started to save middle level activities. 30 years later, we're eliminating the fees for the activities. We're pretty proud of that anyway. So, all right, a little bit about the financial impact. We have given $3 million plus in grants over the 30-year history, and this past year we gave almost $300,000. I would almost say that could have been a $300,000 by the time the year was over, but the book's closed. So, so it's good. And we give our finances do well when everyone's finances do well, because we give 5% of what we make on our investments out in grants. So the more money we make, the better the market is, the more we can give back to the district. And, you can see our largest portion of income comes from public support. So kudos to the St. Cloud community, who really do step up and support their kids, that's for sure. And our greatest distribution is grants back to District 742. You can see that line there. The fundraising amount is very, very minimal, mostly because we don't do a lot of it. It just happens. It happens that the community gives. So that's kind of fun. And there you can see the wheel of kind of how it's all divided. Largely activities for after school, and then academics. Our Adopt a Classroom program has just skyrocketed. Interesting story that at Kennedy this year, there were 4 teachers. A parent contacted us and said, how many teachers at Kennedy didn't get a grant? And there were 4. They gathered a group of people together and funded those 4 classrooms, just a group of parents. It was pretty cool. PACRAT and PACCAT certainly are still going strong, and a large part of it. The Language Immersion Program, our Homeless Student Services Fund. People can have a flow-through fund, a scholarship fund created through LEAF, and so we have several of those that are in there. The Music Matters was when the St. Cloud All-City Marching Band disbanded and had to donate their money to a nonprofit, and LEAF was the recipient of that. So many of our grants to the music department can come through that fund as well. And then, of course, our participation fund, which was definitely increased when Ion and Jesus did their dancing a year ago. So we have a pretty large account there to help students needing either fees or equipment, shoes, as they said, whatever might happen. So that's kind of how it's all dispersed. There are some pictures of the things that we have funded. Grant goodness. At our annual meeting, we did the awards that we do annually. So the award winners this year were Costco, because they had their employees go to Westwood last year and read to first graders. I think it was first graders. Costco paid them, so it was employee time that they got to come and read with the students, and they actually brought books, and it was just a wonderful program. The George and Shirley Torrey Award, which is for charitable giving, went to Kevin and Beth Donnelly. And then the Volunteer Service Award went to Grandpa John over at Delahi for all of his work with writing grants, of which we help him sometimes because he needs support for that. And the Distinguished Alumni Award is going to Terry and Sue Pladsen this year. They are both graduates of Tech High School. The Instructional Excellence Award, Kristen Dolman-Stoll, who's the art teacher at Westwood Elementary, and Amanda Soiter, who teaches at Apollo, I think, EL? Okay. Ben Thel, who is at Tech and coaches and advises the math league. And then Christy Hewson for her Coaching and Advising Excellence Award. So those were our district winners. And then we did give a Lifetime Service Award to Bruce Henches. And Peggy Carlson actually got that award a few years ago, because she's also very integral to what we do at LEAF. And they were classmates, class of 68, I think, at Tech. So that was kind of fun. In essence, we're just grateful to have this partnership with the district. We are grateful to be able to support the students in the community and in your district. from the day they're born until graduation. And that's what, I think that picture is very cool for that. Any questions you have for us?
Anybody have any questions or comments at all? Scott?
Can you tell me a little more about the homeless program?
Well, I can tell you that it's a fund that we have that we work in conjunction with the district rep for transition. Thank you. Yeah, COCO, yeah. When there's a need that arises, COCO will work with us and we can provide some emergency funding for families. We did have a grant from the city of St. Cloud for a while that also went into that, but we do not have that grant anymore. I think we also fund part of that fund with a United Way grant. But it's designed, in fact, at our retreat, we have a retreat next week, or 2 weeks from now, to kind of go through our strategic plan and look at sort of our committee structure, all sorts of things. And we're going to have a discussion about what's the right name for that fund. So,
Homeless might be right. I know in board policy, we went through names and we came back to homeless because that's what it says in the law.
yeah, it might be the one, yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
I've donated to Leaf for a while, and when I first started giving to Leaf and choosing a charity, one of the reasons that I decided to go with, well, there's a couple of reasons that I decided to go with Leaf, but the main reason that I decided to go fairly heavily with Leaf is there was a lot of transparency in where the money was going. There was a lot of transparency in where it was coming from. And I felt very comfortable, therefore, that the funds that I was donating were being given to the resources that the people said that they were going to be given to. Recently, I'm going to say it hasn't been as transparent. If I go online and look at the website for Leaf, most of it hasn't been updated for 2 to 3 years, sometimes up to 8 or 9 years. There's no financials posted on there anymore. There's no meeting minutes posted on there anymore. It's as though this website is just kind of hanging out there and it's been forgotten about. And then along with that, this is hard for me to talk about this because I'm not looking for recognition. That's not the thing. But I also don't like to be wrongly recognized. And when I go in and look at the donor lists or whatever, they haven't been updated. The major sponsors was last updated in 2018 online. And so a lot of the major sponsors that are listed, and they're getting the primary visibility on that website, some of them don't even give anymore. And some of them that do give a lot are listed down at the very bottom. And the supporters and sponsors page was last updated in 2015. So it's been like 9 years since that's been updated. It's not even close to being accurate. History last updated in 2018. There's a photo contest that was being run that's still a big piece of the website that hasn't been updated since 2024. The executive committee minutes, 2024. The board meeting minutes, 2024. Fundraising reports haven't been updated since 2023. So what I'm getting at is nobody's taking care of the website and the transparency is disappearing. And I'm not saying I don't trust you guys. I know you guys. But for a charity such as yours that relies on donations from the general public, a lack of transparency is going to translate into diminishing funds. And I don't think that any of us want that for LEAF. And somehow we've got to get that stuff.
So at the risk of sounding defensive,
Well, you can be. I mean,
first of all, our funding, we have seen an increase in. And in fact, we just recently had a very large donation from Kermit Eastman. So that was pretty nice. We are going through a transition with the website. We do have somebody hired doing the website. I'm unaware of why the changes would have been in there, and I will check that out. But I didn't realize that the minutes and the finances aren't getting posted anymore. But it is part of what we're discussing at our retreat next week, is that's part of it too, is what is the website? What's our vehicle with the website? Whom do we want to pay to do that? Do we want to continue with the person we have? Do we want to change, So we realize that there are issues with that, and I agree totally with you. We want to be transparent. Absolutely, we want to be transparent. And I know that is the goal of the whole board and the executive director as well. So we'll take that into consideration. So
Yeah.
thanks for the awareness level.
Yep. Well, and thanks for what you do. I'm not being critical of LEAF and I'm fairly close I'm close to the district, so I get to see what happens with it, but other people don't. And so therefore transparency becomes a really important piece of the pie to me. And I wouldn't have that for the school district if we suddenly weren't posting our minutes, or if we weren't posting our financials and keeping everything very transparent and open to the public. I'd bring it up in a meeting there too.
Sure.
So,
Thank you.
yep.
I have a question, Diane, and I don't think you can answer it, but the first part, did you say we're doing a 2-year waiver to middle school activity fees? And so that's all, I don't even know right now, are we currently doing prorating, like it's a $20 or a $40 or $60? Do we have 2 tiers right now in middle school? Anybody know?
Yeah, so the free and reduced lunch piece around the activity fees is, I think right now total $180, but half of it for if I'm free and reduced, either 40 or 80, right?
Right. It doesn't go down to 0 right now. It never has.
No,
Well,
it
as far
hasn't.
as long as I can remember anyway. Okay, so 2 years, we're waiving both tiers, right? Is that right? That is
Yeah,
incredible.
Yes. Yeah, so now everything's off the plate, right? Where I don't have
Right.
to come up with that portion at all.
Yeah. So thank you for that. What's exciting about it to me is the possibility that you can fund this so we can see, did that change? What did that change enrollment? Because we're constantly talking about barriers, as you did with the transportation. And, but we can't, our hands are tied too often to know, well, okay, if we stop doing that, could. So when you come in and you can help us fund that, so then we can see, did that improve that situation? And is that where we want to continue that investment? So that's really exciting. And I guess I'm just looking forward to then knowing the numbers. What did that change for us? So thank you amongst all the other things that you fund. How wonderful this is.
Good. You're welcome.
Anybody else? All right, thanks for joining us.
Thank
We
you for
really
having us.
appreciate it. Okay, we have one more informational item up tonight. We have the system-wide literacy progress and next steps. And welcoming back our regulars lately. So we have Laura Stebner, Director of Elementary Education, and Hillary Johnson, Director of Secondary Education. Again, glad to see you too. Thanks for coming back, and this is exciting to hear about this.
Well, we're always glad to be here. So Chair Haas, members of the board, we are going to really focus in on the READ Act. I have been here a couple of times with you, and Hillary, obviously, in her role as secondary, has worked extremely hard to help spearhead the READ Act, and we also work alongside some other people that we'll share and highlight. But we're going to, our system-wide literacy work is really guided by the Minnesota READ Act. You've had an opportunity to hear about this, and so this is an opportunity for us to share with you what progress we've made since our last update, and then what our next steps are. So just as a reminder, the READ Act has kind of 5 buckets, I would say, of work associated with it. And those buckets are what we'll shape our presentation around tonight. So the Minnesota READ Act requires districts to do specific things related to training. We have specific work to do in curriculum and providing interventions to students. There's a parent notification component and a component for screening, and that's really screening students for characteristics of dyslexia and screening to ensure that students who need additional reading help are found and are provided that help. So those are our 5 buckets, and that is you'll see those through our presentation tonight. So just a few updates when it comes to the Minnesota READ Act itself. These are not 742 updates. These are just, the nature of this work is big, and the state legislature continues to modify and adjust as they are figuring out their first ever legislation like this in Minnesota. And so one of the pieces with training that's been an update at the state level is that we have different phases of teachers who need to be trained when it comes to the science of reading and evidence-based practices. The state had identified different phases of teachers, ensuring that teachers who are teaching students in elementary and early childhood, where some of those foundational skills were most critical, were in the first phase of training. And we've begun that training. We've been doing that for a couple of years now in District 742. Phase 2 teachers are teachers who are going to be secondary language arts teachers. There's other teachers who are part of that group, and their phase 2 training was actually delayed until 2026, not 22-26. And that reason was we were also implementing new standards. And so the state recognized that the work to implement the new standards and then also to take on the training would be a heavy lift for districts as they're figuring out how to use that precious resource of time. Curriculum, we know that the Minnesota Department of Education has partnered with CARI out of the U of M to review different curriculums. They've been focusing on elementary literacy curriculum, and that timeline has been delayed slightly. They had hoped to share with us some new reports in March or the beginning of March, and we're still awaiting those. The state has done a great job of getting us resources, but as they've, again, done this for the first time, there have been some delays along the way. For intervention, we do now know that the state will be reviewing K-12 interventions and helping us understand which interventions are most likely to get the results that we need to see with students. And we will be able to receive that in November of 2025. So we're looking forward to getting that list. The work that the state does to really dig deeply into curriculums and intervention is very helpful for folks in a curriculum role to have that good, solid work to piggyback off of. Parent notification is a component of the READ Act that we'll talk through. Part of the READ Act is that there are regional literacy leads and literacy groups all across the state of Minnesota, and their role is to help districts in executing the READ Act. And so our regional center is starting to work on templates and exemplars for districts when it comes to the parent communication and notification component of the READ Act, and that is something new since the last time we got to talk about that. And then screening, we are waiting on a list of approved screening tools for students in grades 4th through 12th grade. We do have a list of approved screening tools for elementary students. And here in District 742, we are using an approved screener for our 4th and 5th graders. That's in line with elementaries. That really helps us systematically respond and train our teachers. But the state will be providing additional information in screening that can be used in grades 4 through 12. That was set to be shared with us in early 2025, starting to get into mid-2025. We're hoping to hear soon. We've heard that the state is about ready to share that, but at this point, we have not gotten that information yet. So we'll jump into training. I'll share about the elementary progress, and then Hillary will take it away with the secondary. So for elementary, we're really excited. I'll kind of start with that second bullet point. We are at about 90% of our current elementary and early childhood teaching staff that will finish the letters training by the end of next school year. Now, I had an opportunity to share with you a while ago about letters, and it's a very intense training, it's a lot of hours. And so knowing that by the end of next school year, we will have the large bulk of our teachers trained is a huge celebration. Something else we're proud of in elementary as well is that we were challenged with figuring out a way to offer this training within the duty day for our teachers. And that's something that most districts have not figured out how to do. So there's always pros and cons with any choice that you make. So the pro of having it within the duty day was that it was within the duty day. Where job embedded training we know is the way to go whenever we can. The con was we weren't able to move that fast. Again, there's only so many minutes in the day. So we did work with our teachers union and we got feedback from teachers and were able to execute a fast track option for staff who wanted to be able to get done this summer, who wanted that information now, who said, I'm willing to put in the time because I really want to know this to impact my students. And so we have just under 100 teachers who elected that option who will finish up this summer. So that is something very exciting to be able to support not only our teachers who really need that duty day experience, but those teachers who wanted to do something different. And we're also able to compensate those teachers on the fast track who are putting in time outside the duty day to complete training.
Thank you. Oh, Thank you. No?
So close.
I can't. There we go. Sorry about that. Thank you. And I think you'll see in this presentation how elementary has really led the way for us in this, and as secondary, some of the training pieces were put off. So you'll see some of the pieces that we have that are learning from them and growing from all the work that they did. So you can see here our phase 1 teachers, like Laura was talking about in secondary, are our reading interventionists, our EL teachers, our special educators, and our reading specialists. We were fortunate to receive a grant last year. Like Laura was saying, keeping that training in the day has been wonderful for our teachers, but it also takes longer. So we received a grant to get many of our teachers trained last summer. So that's why you'll see why our number is very high, and the number of teachers that we have to train in comparison is also much lower. And so we're very proud of the work that they've done this year in getting trained in a secondary platform. So Laura will talk about letters. In secondary, the training that they're doing is called Carry All, which is in partnership again with the University of Minnesota and Carey Institute. The other part of training that we've done this year is working on a secondary literacy task force. So they have been really instrumental in getting teacher voice into what secondary literacy is going to look like for us as we roll that out over the next couple years.
When it comes to next steps, the READ Act is big, so we always have next steps. We're never done with this work. In K-12, we do have a requirement to train our support staff, and we have that scheduled out for next year. So any support staff, these would be staff that are working alongside our students in various capacities. Any support staff who do work on literacy with students are required to have a training. It's about 8 hours of training, and it's provided by our regional centers as a partnership. And so we have been fortunate to already work with our regional center to have that mapped out right within our professional development time. So this will not impact students. We won't need to pull our support staff away from students to be able to get that training in. And our staff will be able to have that mapped out throughout the year to be able to also have that great background. So as teachers are using practices in the classroom, those support staff members who work alongside teachers and are instrumental to student success also have that same knowledge and background. We also need to create a plan to provide required training for new staff each year, and that's a K-12. And so we are looking at that. The fortunate thing is with so many of our staff trained, this isn't a huge amount. We also are seeing more and more staff that we hire coming in already trained or partially trained. And so we do need to keep our eyes on that, but that isn't the same undertaking as the lift that we did for the whole system to be trained. In elementary, the staff who've completed letters will be able to move into implementation of their new learning within their classrooms next year as the other staff finish up. So we have about 2/3 of our staff that will finish up next year, and those fast trackers will be able to start really that key implementation work, which is exciting to have some folks on the forefront with more time and capacity to implement some of those new practices and to do that with their colleagues and peers and really discuss how that's changing things for students.
And in secondary, as our teachers were able to finish up the carry-all training last summer, we've been really focusing on this school year of working with, because they are special educators and our EL teachers are getting to work in their PLTs on what implementation of their learning looks like in their classrooms. We are also very excited about the work that we're going to be doing coming up, working with our special educators on writing structured literacy goals for our students with identified reading disabilities. So we're really trying to take that learning that we did in Carry All and implement it into places that we know will have a lot of impact on our students' reading.
So next we move into curriculum. There's a lot happening in curriculum. Actually, just before this room got turned into this, we had about 30 educators in here looking at elementary curriculum. So it's exciting work. We have a curriculum review in progress right now. This means that we need to select a new resource. So in elementary, we've had the same resource for about probably a good 10, 11 years. We've updated it with new copyright, so we aren't using old materials. We've had updated materials, but our teachers have been using the same curriculum for quite some time. So now we have this great opportunity as part of our curriculum review cycle to use the knowledge we've gained in our science of reading training, use the great tools provided by the state of Minnesota, and to bring multiple and differing perspectives together to say what's next for our students. So we had about 30-some staff here today because we invited administrators to join us as well, but our 20-plus staff on the team includes classroom teachers, EL teachers, special education teachers, and building and district administrators, and then we expanded that out now that we're at this stage of vendor presentations to really include our principal voice as well. We're really careful. You can imagine that with a district of 8 schools, we know that our schools have different communities. We know that there are different needs. And so we're very careful to make sure that all grades and all schools are represented. Now, that doesn't mean there's a first, second, third, fourth, fifth grade teacher from Madison. But as we map this out, we ensure that every school is represented and every grade's represented. And sometimes we have multiple grade levels, but that really helps us to make the best decision. This team has spent a great deal of time reviewing the U of M Carry All and MDE reports and rubrics. These are very intense and very in-depth, and we did all of that work before we even looked at a teacher manual, before we had a vendor presentation, because we really wanted to align with the science. We know that there are products, and we know that products have lots of great people who share them with us. We also know that there can be things that we aren't going to see in a 50-minute vendor presentation. So starting with the reports and rubrics has really helped us to ensure that we're leaning into the evidence-based practices to help us choose what presentations to see. Those vendor presentations started today, and we will do probably 4 or 5 more throughout the spring. And then that is in the ultimate goal of identifying which programs we would pilot next school year, and then at the end of next school year, choosing what would be our new resource going into the following year.
You can see that this is definitely an area that elementary has been given different resources than secondary. So secondary, at this point, MDE will not review secondary ELA curriculum. So what our secondary ELA task force has been really focusing on is that ELA instructional vision. So they did kind of the same work that Laura did in elementary by looking at the research. What does best practice say for secondary students? And really coming up with being able to articulate that vision that we want to see. And the next thing that they're going to be doing is auditing our current resources for the structured literacy that we know is best practice for our students.
When it comes to next steps in elementary, like I said, we'll be piloting. We will pilot in a wide variety of classrooms, so we always really look to make sure that we expand the pilot to be as big as it can be within reason. There can be financial constraints with a pilot. We also know that it is a big lift for teachers, so teachers have to understand what this feels like, but we do our very best to ensure that we're piloting in many classrooms and including our Spanish immersion classrooms. Now, Chinese is a little different because it's not a letter-based, it's a character-based language. So their curriculum process for literacy is a little bit different. When we do other curriculums like math and such, Chinese immersion was within that regular process. But for Spanish immersion, it's really essential. They are going to be part of our review. They actually are part of our review. We will make those final recommendations in spring of 2026. And then what's always so important is ensuring that we don't just spend a lot of time and effort and energy on picking the resource. We really think about what does implementation look like. So setting goals for our implementation, understanding how we'll progress monitor those goals, and the roles and responsibilities for implementing a new literacy curriculum don't just fall on classroom teachers. It's our whole system that needs to support that. So developing goals and roles and responsibilities to clearly show how we will take this resource and bring it into our classrooms.
And similarly, in secondary curriculum, you can see once we review our current resources, that diverse team of secondary teachers will also make recommendations for what our secondary programming looks like and decide if we need to look at any supplemental materials in order to meet our the knowledge that we have on structured literacy.
Next up, we have intervention. I'm really proud of the work that our district has done around intervention this year. This has been a huge focus area for our elementary teachers and a fantastic partnership where we've worked closely with EL and special education, and our literacy coordinator for elementary, Lori Eckert, has done just a tremendous job in leading this work. The progress that we've made is we have now, with our tool FastBridge that we use as a screener, we are able to use a report that helps us understand which students need intervention and what those interventions are. But you still have to then figure out, how do I get those into the classroom? How do I know if the help is helping? And so we've done a lot of professional development to help our staff understand, how do I read the reports? How do I look at my literacy block to incorporate interventions within? Some of our students do attend interventions with teachers outside their classroom, but many of our students are still in need of intervention, and it's important for us to all own that intervention component. And then progress monitoring as well, so that we understand if the help is helping. This fall in October, we did a training day where we spent about a half a day with our teachers training, giving them time to plan with their teams and their full teams, their grade level colleagues, their EL, their special ed counterparts, to implement those new practices and data collection. And then our principals have really been working hard to review fidelity and impact data. So we've had this opportunity, but we know that not everyone changes at the same rate or the same pace. And so we've really rallied around that support and having an opportunity for our principals to check in on their data and say, what are some places and spaces where we might need to lend additional support? And for those places and spaces where we've gotten off the ground, what impact are we seeing for our student growth with our interventions that are being implemented across elementary? So that work happened in January of 2025, and Ms. Hansen is working really hard to create a schedule next year where we try to figure out how we have some regular data components right within for our teachers to continue to touch in on the data and be able to respond to their student needs.
Sorry. In secondary, just like Laura said, this is an area that we are really proud of, as I have had the honor of being the director of a really amazing team of literacy specialists, a literacy coordinator with Andy Lanning, who has really been a leader in our region in this work. Every time we talk to, like Laura talks about our regional support teams from MDE, they very often are coming to our secondary team to see the work that we're doing, and as much as even asking Andy to present at Compass trainings. So we are, again, very proud of this work in secondary because we are placing students, so we are doing screeners, we are placing students in available science of reading courses where they are getting a Sunday intervention. And our literacy specialists that work very hard continue to support our middle school and high school, and even our EL Reading Foundations 3 classes with those interventions.
When we think about next steps for elementary, we need to continue to build on the momentum from this year. So we're excited. We've gotten some new practices in place, and now we can refine and build on that. Building in those regular opportunities for staff to review data and to plan interventions, putting that right into our professional development calendar. And then, like I said, one of the updates from the Minnesota Department of Education is that they will release a list in November to us of approved interventions. And so that will be an opportunity for us to take a look at what we're doing. Are there things we could could modify to do better based on that state level guidance. It's never a great idea to just overhaul the whole system, but it gives us an opportunity to pause and say, what is this new information? How might it help us refine our practices in order to ensure that for our students, especially students who are needing the most support, that we are using the practices that are the most efficient and effective with those students to ensure that they're reading at grade level.
And then again, you can see in secondary, we're still waiting. But like I said, we aren't just doing nothing while we wait. Like, we have been really placing resources and energy and trying to be leaders and understanding what this looks like in secondary while we wait for the approved interventions.
Next up, we'll talk about parent notification. And so the progress that we have made here is really just staying connected to updates from our regional literacy leads. We know that they're working to provide exemplars for us and some templates so that we can not every district has to start from scratch. So the regional center will help support us. We are already, though, notifying parents across K-12 when students are receiving specialized reading services. So it's not that we're waiting for the regional center to tell parents that their students are receiving a reading intervention. However, as the regional center works on their parent communication, there may be things that they include that really would be great additions to our process. So we have a process in place. We'll keep an eye on what those updates are from the regional center. Our next steps for K-12 are then to review those templates when they become available, and we also have to recognize the needs of our 742 families. We have a diverse group of students and families, and so it will be important to not just pick up an exemplar and say this is what works for our community, but to review that carefully and to get feedback from different stakeholder groups, and then be able to say, is there modifications in our communication plans we would make based on these exemplars, and also to meet the needs of families across the district. And then we'll jump into screening. So in elementary, we are in the second year of using a MDE-approved screener. We're using the screener FastBridge. We've built capacity for our staff to understand the data, to develop instructional actions to respond. So we don't just want to screen students and say, okay, we screened them. We want to make sure that we're taking action and we're ensuring that students are getting instruction that's in line with their needs. And then we're gathering teacher feedback to potentially modify some of our screening based on MDE guidance. So the Minnesota Department of Education has specific subtests that are required. The FastBridge assessment has additional subtests that we can give. And so often that data is great. We can respond to that data, but it's balancing the amount of time in instruction versus the amount of time assessing. And so right now we're working particularly with kindergarten to take a look at potentially reducing some of the screening, but then also recognizing what might the trade-offs be without that data. So we obviously always want to have teacher voice in that, and our kindergarten task force has been working with their kindergarten teams to collect that information to help inform district decisions.
And in secondary, this is another place that I give a lot of credit to the team. Katie Schneider is the dyslexia specialist. Years ago, put in a really thoughtful and well-researched process for dyslexia screening. So we, like I said, are ahead of the curve on many secondary schools on this. And so what we're doing at this time while we wait is continuing the dyslexia process that we have outlined in our local literacy plan.
Screening for next steps in elementary is, there is also a tool developed by the state which helps us to identify risk factors for students. And I won't get into the weeds with this, but this is a really nice tool that we'll be able to put into place because very often as students across the state are using different curriculums, different interventions, different screening tools. We may get a student in that received a reading intervention in one district and then now comes to our district, and districts tend to have different processes for that. The Minnesota Department of Education risk factor will help us to have a more streamlined process across the state. Districts are able to opt in or out of that process, but it does really streamline and help us understand with the Minnesota Department of Education tests that are required. It assigns a numerical quantity to those, so then we're able to identify based on just those required assessments which students are at high risk and some risk, and that will be consistent across the state. As the conversations I have are most districts are really finding a lot of value and plan to shift to that risk factor system.
And again, us in secondary are waiting. And like I said, we continue to do a lot of work while we wait for those tools. And definitely, once we get our eyes on them, we'll review our processes and make recommendations for next best steps. Well, I'm going to press pause on this one. Quick. So you get to have a quick preview. Oh, no. I am very excited. Next week at our district professional development day, we are, I'm going to just hold. Next week at our district professional development day, we are going to roll out Tier 1 literacy in secondary. We have principals with literacy specialists and directors, and all of us are coming together to create a consistent long-term message about how we're going to work on literacy in secondary. And I also want to give a giant shout out to Ion, who helped me put together some student voice. So you'll get a little preview tonight of what the teachers will see next week.
Literacy is important to me because after high school, I want to go to college and find options that can help me support my family and find a good paying job.
Literacy is important to me because I want to become a pediatrician, and that requires a lot of medical terminology, and I just want to make a better life for me and my family.
Literacy is important to me because I want to be able to get into the medical field and be able to help provide for my family.
Literacy is important to me because I believe you should be able to communicate openly, freely, and express the things that you're trying to say.
Literacy is important to me because it helps me achieve my dreams and my goals and will help me define myself in the future.
Literacy is important to me because I can read papers from family members who doesn't know how to read. Also, make my mom proud because when she was growing up, she didn't go to school to learn how to read and write.
Literacy is important to me because my dreams of being a teacher and a coach rely a lot on personal relationships, being able to engage, have empathy, listen to others, be understanding. The personal skills and understanding where other people are coming from is extremely important.
Literacy is important to me because it improves the capability to decrease poverty and helps with communication.
Literacy is important to me because I want to become nurse and help other people and find a good career to help my family and me.
Literacy is important to me because I want to be a successful psychiatrist and I want to make a difference in my bank account and the lives of others.
We'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Okay, does anybody have any questions or comments? Scott?
The legislature put in the science of reading. Is letters kind of the result of that?
So the science of reading is a body of research that is quite old, lots of different branches of science. The LETTERS program is one of the state-approved training modules for teachers to learn the science of reading. There are other state-approved, there are 3 currently for elementary, and our district chose LETTERS. And so basically what LETTERS is a way for teachers to receive training in the science of reading specific to their role as educators.
Okay. You kept mentioning regional centers. Where is a regional center? Here?
Is in Sartell. So if you've heard of Resource Training and Solutions, that is another name it might go by, but the regional, and maybe Hillary, you should maybe speak to this.
Yeah, so part of the legislation is to fund those regional centers that went into each of the, there are 8 service co-ops, and our service co-op is the Resource Training and Solution that hosts our regional reading and math specialists.
You were mentioning, I think it was Carriall, part of the University of Minnesota, and they seem to have been really linked close with the Department of Education. Can you explain a little more about that?
I mean, I can start, and I'm sure Laura has been working on the READ Act longer than I have. But just like letters is taking the science of reading and is one of the options for our teachers to think about it as educators, Carry All is the version that they put together specific to secondary teachers. So it takes that same body of research and makes it accessible to our teachers in 6 through 12.
And that connection between the University of Minnesota and the READ Act is explicit in the legislation. So it says the Minnesota Department of Education will partner with CARI, which is the research institute at the U of M, to do this work. So that is why you'll see that come up. But that's part of the legislation itself, is that the Department of Ed would partner to help to do this work across the state.
Okay. We follow state standards. There's been, do we finally have social studies standards? What are they?
So the new standards go into effect in a couple of years. They've just recently been approved. So you can find all of them listed on the Minnesota Department of Education website. So it's hard for us to be able to tell you what they all are because each and every grade level has a multitude of standards. But those standards will go into effect. They'll be implemented in 26-27, right?
Yes.
26-27. It's hard to keep them
Fall
all
of
straight.
26.
There's some mention of dyslexia. I know one of our former board members was very heavily involved in that. Can you tell me what's happening at this time?
So years ago, dyslexia, there was a big push at the state, and that has really gone hand in hand with the Minnesota READ Act. So those are not necessarily one and the same, but the work for dyslexia has been encompassed into the Minnesota READ Act. I can give you a specific example of elementary, how things are more streamlined. So in the past, we would do a specific dyslexia screener assessment where a human would sit down with a child to conduct an assessment. Shannon was instrumental in this work, so we have to give Shannon a shout out for this. But now with the state approved assessments like FastBridge, that is also a dyslexia screener. And so now as the state has recommended specific assessments that we need to choose from, it also helps us in our capacity to identify students with dyslexia because the tools they're recommending we use help us do that. And it takes out some of the real significant legwork that it took to do that with a one-on-one person. And so that specific work on identifying students happens through our screening process. And then as we talked through interventions today, those students who are identified with characteristics of dyslexia would be receiving interventions, as well as other students who need support who may not have those characteristics. So dyslexia isn't seen as much as a standalone. It still is definitely a separate piece for students who have dyslexia, but as we rally around supporting all of our students who need support to learn how to be grade level proficient readers, dyslexia is right within that wraparound support that we provide.
Thank you very much.
Back one slide to the very last, there. Begin using the MDE risk factor tool. Can you tell me what the risk factors would be? What are we looking at? What's defined as a risk factor?
I will do my very best. This is fairly new. And so what happens is there are specific assessments that help us identify risk for being able to read at grade level. Each assessment has measures different components. So for example, there can be a nonsense word assessment. So nonsense words is asking students to use their decoding skills to sound out a word that could be like easily sounded out, but is not a real word. That's an assessment that's used because if students see a word or are familiar with a word, they may have that word memorized, but maybe aren't decoding it. So nonsense words is one example. What the state has done is they have then assigned a threshold for the risk level for each of those assessments, and then that threshold generates a number. Those numbers are calculated together, and then if a student has a certain sum, then that helps us as a district know of all of these subtests, this student performed in a way that would indicate that we really need to pay attention to their needs. The reason this is helpful is that on the FastBridge assessment, which is our universal screener, we do receive a composite score, and that composite score also helps us understand risk. However, the way that the tests are weighted within the FastBridge system isn't necessarily the way that the State Department would recommend based on their legislation. And so districts, before the risk factors came out, we're asking the state, so if a student shows up on this tool as at risk, is that what we should be going with? Some of the assessments we're giving are not required. And so this is a tool that allows us to have sort of a numerical quantification for all of the required assessments. We always want to triangulate data and look at multiple data points for students. And so it's a really slick way for us to know which data points to look at, how to weight those data points, and to rely on those expertise of really those top level state researchers around risk to then say, okay, these are our students who we want to prioritize resources for intervention. Does that answer your question? It's very new. We just found out about it this spring, so we haven't been able to put it into use yet.
I think it answers my question in the sense that at risk would then be a measurement of how they are progressing.
Yes,
in
and it's really
reading.
at risk of reading, being a proficient reader.
And not a measurement of, I mean, when I talk about, when I think about learning, going to school, learning, I always go back to it, but you gotta feel safe. You have to have food. You have to have, that's where the risk is coming from. That's where the majority, when I look at a district like ours that scores very low, I don't think that it's kids that can't learn. I don't think that it's teachers that don't know how to teach. I mean, it's absolutely not. We probably have some of the best teachers in the state because of the kids that they work with tend to be more difficult, farther behind in learning. So you're always trying to catch kids up and giving different interventions and things like that. What I see in a district like ours is a bunch of kids whose social emotional needs aren't met, and it makes learning almost impossible without regard to the interventions. And a much larger risk factor or measurement of risk would be just looking at the community and the poverty levels within a school and the ability of kids to be able to overcome those risk factors to put them in a mind state where they can learn. And this isn't measuring that. I was just wondering if this was something to do with measuring that. And if that, and then again, if that was the case, then you could start to disaggregate that and develop a expectation level. And we expect the most out of everybody. I get it. But they pit us against each other with MCA test scores and say this district is great and this district isn't. But with some type of a risk assessment type of system, you would be able to go back and level those playing fields a little bit and say, hey, these kids in this district, with this level of poverty and homelessness and all of the crime and things that go in this neighborhood versus a wealthy neighborhood with very low levels of crime and a lot of security, the kids are going to perform differently in those two areas, and you could begin to level the playing field a little bit as far as measurement is concerned.
So unfortunately, that is not this. Yeah.
So yes, you answered the
Yeah, but I'm glad you brought it up because, right, that could be misleading. So really, it's measuring the student's risk in relation to being a proficient reader at grade level.
Thank you both for joining us again. We appreciate it.
No problem.
Thank you.
Have a great night.
Okay, moving on to discussion items. We have two tonight. First, we have the task to appoint board members to award diplomas at Tech and Apollo commencements, which will be held Saturday, May 31st, 2025. Obviously, I have two board members reach out to me, Diana and Natalie, that will not be available to help with awarding diplomas. So that leaves 5 of us left, looking for 2 people for Tech, 2 people for Apollo, and then either I can be one of them or I can be the backup. Yeah, you'll be the backup, okay. Are you going to be here? Okay, and you'll be there? You'll do Apollo, okay, and I'm guessing maybe you would, okay. I'm guessing Heather would like to do Tech, do you think? Okay. So we'll do Apollo will be Scott. Choose your poison. It's not poison, choose your pleasure.
I'm the north side.
You're the north side, that's what I thought, yeah. Okay, so we'll do Scott and Zach for Apollo, myself and Heather for Tech, and then Al will be backup. Thank you very much. Well, in case somebody can't make it or something, yeah. But and always feel free to step in if there's like one particular that you want to hand out or something too. So we can be flexible with that. All right. Then we only have one other discussion item. We have, of course, a policy reading. We have proposed revised board policy 707, the second reading for transportation of public school students, and presented by Shannon Avison, Assistant Superintendent of E12 Educational Services.
Good evening, Chair Haas and members of the board. As you recall, we were just here last week and reviewed this policy pretty thoroughly. Hold on one second, I will get that pulled up. Okay, there we go. Just as a reminder, this policy is around transportation, and the only proposed changes that we are recommending for this policy, there's a language proposal around what Scott referred to earlier tonight, changing transition back to homeless. And that was specific because in the McKinney-Vento Act and the statute, that's the term that is used. So that is our recommendation around those language changes. And then additionally, as a reminder, as you go through, you'll see a very lengthy list of statutes throughout this policy, and at the end, there's a long list of statutes. This policy is governed by those statutes, and so we are not recommending changes to those because they are statute related. The proposed addition to this policy, and I'll scroll the motion. Our proposed language addition would be around reasonable transportation restrictions. This is a recommendation and an alignment with several other districts across the state. And then just a reminder that I did do this in consultation with our legal team, Amy Mace, around language that would be within our rights and within the law. And so, reminder, I won't read those again because we read through those last week in depth, but after last week's first reading, there were no additional changes to this proposed policy 707. Any questions? Thank you.
Okay, then we have the Board of Education Standing Committee reports presented by the committee chairs. Diana, I believe you have the Achievement, Integration, and Equity Committee report?
Yes, thanks, Chair Haas and members of the board. The Achievement, Integration, and Equity Committee meeting met this morning. There were 3 items that we discussed. First, Dr. Harris brought forward a recommendation to alternate the school update and the school presentations to a bi-monthly reporting versus a monthly reporting to the board. The committee agreed on the reductions of the presentations to the board. Second, Ayan Omar presented a draft of the response to the NAPAC non-concurrence vote. This will be an item for discussion on the April 2nd, 2025 board meeting. And third, Dr. Jason Harris and Hillary Johnson provided the secondary education presentation update that was recently presented at the Cabinet. The presentation included data on the professional learning teams, comprehensive balance assessment system, and information in the NIPSE framework that has been designed to position every student for post-secondary success in the district.
Thank you. Al?
Diana, are those going to be given to members of the board prior to that meeting?
The draft of the NAPAC response, yes, we will provide a draft copy for discussion at the next board meeting.
Before the meeting?
Oh, yep, we'll get that to you before. Yep.
Okay, thank you. And we don't have any other reports, correct? I don't think so. Okay. Then we have, last up is future agenda items. The April 2nd, 2025 board meeting topics will include community celebration, approval of the 2025-2026 compensatory revenue plan. We have the 2025-26 FTE projections based on enrollment and registrations, the NAPAC board response letter, the 2025 school summer review, 2025 summer projects review, policy readings, and school updates. At this time, does any board member want to suggest a future agenda item? Al? Welcome back, and something.
I just have a question that I was thinking about earlier today, and it has to do with the the next year's school budget. And I think I was listening to the radio and heard them talking about shortfalls through AMSD, through the AMSD schools. And then they listed the St. Cloud School District is short X amount funding. And I know that the budget is being developed right now, and changes are being proposed. I mean, they were saying that we had a shortfall of 900,000 or whatever it is, and another 500,000 for something else. And I know that our administration is going through the process of looking at things and proposing budgets, but I'm wondering, and it may be a finance committee agenda item, but somewhere prior to the presentation of the proposed budget, I would sure like to see what and how we're addressing those shortfalls so that it doesn't come to the board as a surprise. Thank you.
Yeah, that sounds good, and I know Amy is watching that and would have some dates and.
Not questioning in any way,
Yeah.
shape, or form
Yeah.
that
Oh,
they've
yeah,
identified the
absolutely.
shortfalls
Yeah.
and we're making plans to do it and to have a balanced budget with the least disruption possible.
Yeah.
However, I would like to see some of that prior to the board meeting when that's presented.
Sounds good. Thank you. Anybody else? Anything? Okay. Wonderful. How exciting is that? So looking for a motion to adjourn tonight's Board of Education meeting.
So moved.
Motion by Scott. Second by Diana. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Meeting is adjourned. It is 7:43 PM. Have a good night. Thanks for watching.